Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host. When he played the Final Fantasy VI deck, he totally wrecked us with it. So you could say it was a terrible time. It's Dana Roach.
I did not get enough sleep last night for that kind of a joke. People were up all around me in town lighting off fireworks, and I don't understand why people still do holiday stuff like a week after the 4th of July. I had a bottle rocket that almost set my Christmas decorations on fire. It was really frustrating.
Wow, okay. You know what? Call me Gal Gadot, because I don't know how to act right now, Dana. That was funny as heck.
Wow, just taking strays, Gal Gadot.
Sorry, love. Anyway, Dana, it's the two of us on this week's episode. And in this podcast, we're talking about the real reason that players hate combo in EDH.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at some EDHREC data about combos. EDHREC did a poll recently, several months back, asking players which two-card combos they think qualify as early game combos versus late game combos, which is kind of relevant for whether or not they're kind of like justified in bracket 3.
Yeah, absolutely. The brackets image, it says, no early game combos on it, but that's kind of vague terminology. So we, as EDHREC, we took to the community to try and figure out what players think about those combos and what qualifies as early game versus a late game combo to make sure that the combos, if you do have them in your deck, still feel appropriate to play at the power level that you yourself want to play at with other people.
Yeah, one of the most frequent questions you see if you ever browse like the Reddit Commander subreddits is this combo okay in bracket 3? Like that's a question people regularly ask. So like having a little bit of data, even if it is opinion-based data, is kind of useful for determining which one of these things are appropriate in bracket 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this episode, we're going to go over the result of that poll, share all of that data with you, and talk about what it really is that makes a combo feel like an unfun way to end a game versus the things that can make a combo a fun ending to a game. Because contrary to some popular belief, there are fun combos that can make a game end in a satisfying way. So we do kind of want to go over the differences there. Also coming up, we will have a couple of preview cards for Edge of Eternities that we'll get to very, very soon. So hold on tight for that too. Dana, though, I think to get started with this topic, we've got to establish where can we even find all of this data about combos that we're going to be talking about in the first place?
Yeah, luckily, it's very easy to get to if you just go to edhrec.com/combos. Of all things, that will take you to the information.
Yeah, just in general, this is a really useful tool to find the most popular combos in the entire format. They're all broken down by color identity on this page, and this tool is so dang useful, Dana. Like, it not only tells you what the combos are and the cards that go into them, but it also will tell you how many decks those combos appear in, the commanders that play those combos the most often, how the combos work, too. That's my favorite part. Like, it tells you what you need to enable them and how to make the combo happen, rather than just like, I slap these two cards on the battlefield and expect them to work for me. It tells you the steps that you as a player need to do so that you're not puzzling too much when you get those things lined up. And it also tells you the end result of each of those combos, like whether the result is you gain infinite life or infinite damage or you have infinite death triggers and things like that. So it's just such a useful tool for you to upgrade your game.
And being able to break them down by early game versus late game, I mean, there's no definitive like rule that's saying this is 100% going to be viewed this way versus viewed the other way, but like it's going to give you a rough idea of what people in a general sense view as an early game combo versus a late game combo. There might still be conflicts, but like by and large, I think it's a pretty useful measuring stick.
Well, and Dana, I think that's really appropriate too. Like, it not being an exact science is kind of the tagline for EDH, more or less. We're gauging, the social impact that these have. So knowing what players, by and large, are sort of perceiving, getting too hung up on like technicalities would be kind of missing the point, would be missing the forest for the trees a little bit. And just the point is that we want to know how other players will feel about the cards that we're playing. That way we can guarantee that everyone is having a good time. That's not something we can learn from a book. That's something that we discover by collaborating with other players. And that's exactly what this type of tool is seeking to promote.
And we've done in the past entire episodes about the most popular combos. So if you want to check those out, we'll link them in the description here down below.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? One other really cool benefit of this too is that sites like Architect, for instance, are also able to use the data that we've assembled here to give players better estimates about which bracket their deck falls into when their deck contains a combo like one of these, just right there in the deck building process, which I think is pretty neat. It's really nice to see a bunch of these deck building websites find better tools to assist people on figuring out where it is that their deck would be most appropriately bracketed and what best they can communicate to other players to find a fantastic game.
Yeah, I think any and all tools we have access to that help people find evenly matched games are part of kind of that larger toolbox of things you have to just make the best play experience you can possibly come up with.
100%.
And speaking of useful tools, we are excited to be teamed up with Dragon Shield, our favorite manufacturer of Magic sleeves and deck products.
That segue, though. Wow.
I've been using their MTG Card Manager app, which you can find for both iOS and Android by searching for Dragon Shield. MTG Card Manager makes it easy to check prices for trays and track your Magic collection. You can check up the value and stats and instantly translate foreign language cards and find Oracle text and rulings. It's the perfect companion app for Magic the Gathering. Manage your cardboard treasures like a dragon.
This show is also brought to you by our patrons over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. This show could not happen without you. And to show our thanks, we have great perks over there on Patreon, including access to our Discord, where you can chat with us, maybe find a game with some players there, or there's access to the Challenge the Stats spreadsheet showing all of our challenges over the years. If it makes sense for you to support us on Patreon, we appreciate it so much. And if you want to support us in totally free ways, you can do that too. Leaving a review on your podcast app is huge, for instance. But also, all right, Dana, I'm going to be a little bit cheesy here. So it's my birthday early next month, and this is honestly so silly and really a long shot, but we're really dang close to 100K subscribers on YouTube. And I think at our current rate, we're probably on track to hit 100K by the end of August. But I don't know, it'd be kind of cool if we hit 100K by my birthday at the start of August instead. I don't know, like I said, super cheesy, super long shot. But
I think that's actually pretty cool. That would be a pretty sweet birthday present for you, Joey. I think we should try to get there. That's something we should for sure shoot for. I like that.
Just if folks ever have considered subscribing before and haven't yet, we appreciate the love so much. But anyway, one final thing. In every episode, we like to shout out one of our fantastic patrons. So this week, we'd love to heap some praise on Sage Fulcher. Sage, thank you so dang much for being a patron. You make this show possible. Okay, Dana, I really want to get back to talking about some combos, but we did actually hint earlier that we do have some preview cards for Edge of the Eternities. So I think maybe we should talk about those real quick before we get back into all of this combo-tastic data.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at what we have, because we have two cards that somehow managed to not get leaked in the flurry of leaks that were leading up to the Edge of Eternities previews.
My heart. Anyway, yeah, let's get to them now. Our first preview card is Pulsar Squadron Ace, a 2-mana, 1 and a white, uncommon creature human pilot. It is a 1/2. When this creature enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a spacecraft card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature.
And the second card we had is Rescue Skiff, a 6-mana artifact spacecraft. So 5 and a white. It's a 5/6. And when the spacecraft enters, return target creature or enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It has Station, which is a new ability. You tap another creature you control and you put charge counters on the spacecraft equal to its power, and you can station only as a sorcery. And it becomes an artifact creature when it's at 10 or more. So basically, once it has 10 or more counters on it, it then is permanently crewed, more or less, and becomes a 5/6 creature. It also has flying. So the way Station works, it's kind of like Level Up combined with vehicles.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say these are very dedicated, limited uncommons, not the kind of thing that will make a big splash in EDH. But all the same, Wizards of the Coast, thank you so much for the free preview cards.
And one last note, I'll be at the Energy Series Showdown weekend in St. Paul, Minneapolis, July 19th and 20th playing Commander. So if you are at the event or in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, stop in and find me for a game.
Heck yeah. All right, so Dana, now let's get back to our talk here about combos and the data that we've gotten from the community, what they think about different combos and what brackets those combos may or may not belong in. And I think it's important for us to differentiate between what those two different things mean. There's some description here on EDHREC that is pretty helpful. So for instance, the early game 2-card combos are described here as early game 2-card combos are combos that have significant results and any prerequisites are trivial to accomplish. They can easily be executed executed early on in the game, and these factors were again voted on by the community in our combo vote a couple months ago.
And this is in contrast to the late game 2-card combos. And again, I'm reading off EDHREC and what the definitions are here. Late game 2-card combos are combos that have significant results and prerequisites are trivial to accomplish, but they cannot be easily executed early on in the game. And these factors were also voted on by the combo vote.
Right, so one of the biggest differentiating factors here is going to be that the early game combos are probably best suited for bracket 4 and bracket 5 spaces, compared to some of the late game combos could actually be, some of them are kind of suitable for the bracket 3 upgraded space.
Yeah.
And to get the lay of the land, let's get a little bit more familiar with what some of these combos are so that people know what it is that we're talking about. I think we'll start off with the early game combos. Dana, what are some of the most popular combos that we're seeing here that meet this definition and that are best suited to the bracket 4 and bracket 5 optimized and CEDH areas of the format?
So we're going to batch a few of these together to use a magic term. So the most voted upon combo here for early game combos is the infamous CEDH Scourge, Thassa's Oracle, and Demonic Consultation.
Yeah.
It's a combo that just wins you the game. It's very low mana and it's difficult to interact with. But there's a couple similar combos. You could just call them Thassa's Oracle combos, whether you're talking Tainted Pact or something similar. There's multiple ways in existence that you can hit that combo that don't play that differently from one another.
Yeah, the idea being that you exile your library with one of those spells, and then Thassa's Oracle comes down, sees your library is empty, wins you the game with that triggered ability. And this is crazy popular. The data that we're seeing here is that the Demonic Consultation and Thassa's Oracle combo shows up in 112,453 decks at the current time of recording, which is 7.2% of all decks total that are eligible to run this combo in the first place. So quite an impact, and again, as you said, very famous in CEDH. This would not at all be appropriate for bracket 3.
Yeah, for all the reasons I mentioned. Like it's efficient mana-wise, difficult to stop or interact with. It's very much an early game combo that just definitionally is for bracket 4 and 5. Next up, again, there's a few things you can batch here together, but like the example we'll use is the Exquisite Blood Sanguine Bond combo. So it's a combination of cards, Exquisite Blood. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. And Sanguine Bond, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So you just have a loop that happens once an opponent loses life, you gain the life, and it deals damage to somebody else, which gains you life, which, basically you create a loop where you kill the entire table. The kind of original and most famous version of this is Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond, but there's multiple ways you can make that work. Exquisite Blood and Veto, Throne of the Dusk Rose, etc. So while Exquisite Blood, Sanguine Bond is the number 2 combo here, there's multiple ones, again, that kind of can be lumped together in one group.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can see that one of those is again showing up in over 100,000 decks. And we can see that a combo like this is showing up in about 3% of decks that are eligible to run it. And since this is a purely mono black combo compared to a multicolored card combo, that means it is competing with a much larger deck pool compared to the previous ones that we just saw. But again, still a pretty significant chunk, especially because this is such a famous way for a life gain deck to end the game at all. But we can see that players maybe don't feel super fond of it if it happens pretty early on in the game, or if your life gain deck is like dedicated to tutoring this type of thing out and making sure that it always happens.
Now, one thing to note here, you do have to have a third piece of interaction of some point here. An opponent has to lose life in order for this to trigger, so it's not necessarily like Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation where those 2 cards get you there on their own. You do require something else to occur, and for the most part, that's going to be the case with most of the rest of the combos we look at. So the next kind of one in the list here would be Dramatic Reversal and Isochron Scepter. So you would put Dramatic Reversal and Instant that untaps all non-land permanents you control. You would imprint that onto Isochron Scepter and lets you spend 2 mana to copy the exiled card and cast the copy. Well, the act of casting Dramatic Reversal untaps Isochron Scepter and presumably something else that gives you mana to allow you to activate it again, basically generating infinite triggers, things like Magecraft. You have something out that, like, when tapped, produces an effect. So you would need something else involved in this combination to actually, like, fire off a win, but it's very easy to do in a deck that's built around doing this sort of thing.
I mean, just a couple of mana rocks gets you there. You know?
Right. Yep.
Like, that's what the data is showing here, and that's why players voted on this, is like, the conditions are pretty trivial. So, like, yes, there is another thing that you need. You need a third card, perhaps, that can tap for mana to make this thing actually work, but you already are going to have that, just like with Exquisite Blood in that combo. All that it takes is 1 point of life switching, and then the combo takes off. Pretty easy to accomplish. Frankly, that honestly goes for the next most popular combo that we're seeing here as well, Dualcaster Mage and Twin Flame, which for folks who aren't familiar is a great way to make infinite ETB effects and infinite Magecraft triggers, and since the tokens that this combo will create have haste, it could also give you infinite combat damage and things like that too. Your prerequisite on this is that you also need to have at least one other creature already on the battlefield. That seems doable.
Yeah.
I think that that's a pretty trivial thing to do, which again is the kind of reason why people would not necessarily look fondly on this if it came up in a bracket 3 deck, especially because of how little mana it will really cost for you to assemble it altogether.
Yeah, again, similar to Dramatic Reversal and Ice Crown Scepter, similar to Thassa's Oracle and anything that enables that, this is a very mana-efficient combo to come down early. And another thing that's true about almost all of these pieces, they tend to be pretty useful on their own. It's not like you're assembling a combo that requires 2 cards that are kind of dead, independent of one another. These combos are very efficient. They can come down early. And if you, for some reason, don't have the other half of it or don't need it, the cards are still very, very good. Like, there's no wasted effort in most of these 2-card combos.
Right. Well, that's the reason that some of these combos could come up in a person's deck completely by accident, which totally does happen. And that's why having data like this can be so useful to help out other deck building websites, so that when they are trying to estimate the bracket of your deck for you as you put your deck into, let's say, Architect or something like that, then they can actually provide information for you that, like, hey, your deck does contain this combo, and also this combo might be perceived as something that is pretty supercharged or something that is actually still comfortable socially or not. And that just makes it such a fantastic and extra helpful bit of information for people to have, because these things do just sometimes wind up in our decks. If you've ever tried to build like a Gave deck before, Gave Guru of Spores, then you'll know the pain of, goodness, it's so hard to not combo off with this type of commander. Some strategies just do really lend themselves to that type of strategy a little bit more by accident. So if you are seeking to avoid these things and you want to have a more social experience and you accidentally find a combo, maybe some information like this will help you figure out whether that's still the kind of thing that you want to keep in your deck because those cards are so valuable, as Dana, you mentioned, or if they're the type of things that you can afford to cut so that you can keep the deck a little bit more where you would like it to be placed.
The next notable early game 2-card combo we have here is Niv-Mizzet Parun and Curiosity. Old school combo because basically this works on most of Niv-Mizzets. Niv-Mizzet Parun is the most recent example, but there's at least one, if not 2 other Niv-Mizzets that basically work the same way, where whenever you draw a card, it deals damage to any target, and Curiosity lets you draw a card whenever you deal damage. So you create that infinite loop of drawing cards and dealing damage, and as long as you have enough cards in your library, you can kill the table.
Yeah, this shows up in 48,000 decks, nearly 49,000 decks. This one, at least, you do tend to see coming because Niv-Mizzet Parun is usually in your command zone if you are playing it, because that mana cost, triple blue and triple red, is so exacting. But sometimes this does just show up in some random Spellslinger type of Izzet deck or things like that. So it's good to be aware of. And obviously you can extrapolate for any of those Curiosity style effects, Ophidian Eye and all of those other ones that will draw you cards whenever the enchanted creature deals damage. They create that loop very, very easily. But again, this can be the kind of thing that people do see coming a little bit more.
Yeah. Another classic combo is Gravecrawler and Phyrexian Altar. Gravecrawler is a single black mana. You can cast it from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. And Phyrexian Altar, 3 mana, sacrifice a creature and add 1 mana of any color. So you sacrifice a creature to get the black mana, recast Gravecrawler, sacrifice again to make a black mana. That's just a loop that doesn't get you ahead necessarily. But if you have anything else in play that, for example, cares about death triggers, or cares about creatures coming into the battlefield, or cares about creatures leaving the battlefield, or whatever that winds up being, it's an infinite loop. It's very cheap, and it's the kind of thing that, again, is using 2 cards that are very, very useful, even independent of one another.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that when I was building my Wilheld deck, I was like, oh, wait a second. Oh, no. Again, it's the kind of thing that could come up by accident. And that isn't the way that I want that particular deck to end the game. So I made the choice to all right, I'll cut these pieces out so that I don't accidentally wind up in a combo, because that's not the area that I would like to play this game. But yeah, this is absolutely a classic. And again, those cards cards are so useful. If you're playing any zombie deck, Gravecrawler kind of lends itself to several of these types of combos, so you do kind of have to watch out for it. But that is why I think this type of tool can be so useful, to let people know that these are the types of cards that could wind up in more of those combos than maybe you as a player actually want to end games that way. So it can be nice to help you identify those pieces if you do want to lean into them, or if you would like to shy away from them instead.
Yeah, there's multiple reasons for having a good idea of how these things work, both because you want to add them to your stronger deck and because you might want to avoid them in a less powerful or lower bracket deck.
Yeah. Or, I mean, we can actually see, again, because there's so much information on these combo pages, the top commanders for this Gravecrawler and Phyrexian Altar combo include Wilhelt, of course, and 41% of Wilhelt players are running this combo. So that's also good to know. It's not just like, oh, this combo is possible in that deck. It turns out a decent chunk of Wilhelt players are intentionally playing this type of combo. So that's useful for you to know as a player too, that whenever you do see a Wilhelt deck, that's probably something that could be on your radar about what that deck's capabilities are. So again, a lot of very useful information in this tool. Dana, I think we'll round it out with one more combo here to kind of get the lay of the land more or less. Some infinite mana combos we've got going on with Basalt Monolith, a 3-mana mana rock that can tap to add 3 mana, and you can pay 3 mana to untap Basalt Monolith, which is good because it doesn't untap naturally during your untap step. A fun mana rock there that combines well with Forsaken Monument, a 5-mana legendary artifact that gives your colorless creatures +2, but also whenever you tap something for colorless mana, such as the Basalt Monolith, you get an additional colorless mana. So you can tap the Basalt Monolith, produce 4 mana instead of 3, then pay 3 mana to untap it, you've net gained 1 mana. Voila, you've got infinite colorless mana. An infinite mana combo that is showing up in 41,000 decks possible out there. Pretty classic. Basalt Monolith also combos with things like Rings of Brighthearth. This is a pretty famous combo engine. There's even a Mesmeric Orb combo that it works out well with. So that's another one of those cards that if I see it on the field, I probably have to be pretty suspicious of it.
Yeah, Basalt Monolith is the kind of card, I mean, it combos with itself to a degree, right? Like, you can use the 3 mana you produce to untap it, to make 3 more mana. Like, you can functionally tap and untap it an infinite amount of times just by itself. And there's a ton of things out there that interact with that in a positive way to generate you basically infinite triggers. It's just a combo machine, and Forsaken Monument is kind of the most recent one that you tend to see because both pieces, again, are really, really good in colorless decks. There's just a lot of combos that can be batched up with Basalt Monolith for sure.
Yeah, and if we keep scrolling down the page, we see a whole bunch more, Chatterfang and Pitiless Plunderer, Bloodchief Ascension and Mindcrank, Heliod and Walking Ballista. Like, there are so many combos that are possible in this format. But we've gotten a pretty good idea of some of the most famous ones that players are saying, hey, this is probably a dedicated bracket 4, bracket 5 type of area. And Dana, before we go to challenge stats, I just want to ask if you notice any common trends from among these, or if you have any observations about combos and why it is that people might find these so particularly jarring.
Particularly the ones that are lumped under early game 2-card combos. We've mentioned the fact that like the individual pieces tend to be really, really useful. There's just no fat, and I think they come out of nowhere for the most part too. You'll have one card down that's already useful on its own. Like, there are some combos when one half comes down, the other, you know exactly what is going on because there's nothing else that interacts with it. That's not the case with most of these. They're all very good on their own. Niv Mizzet Parun is a great card just like sitting by itself existing before you even hit it with a curiosity. Gravecrawler is a great card on its own in a zombie deck, all on its own, So I think that's what it is. These have that feeling of the game just ended and you don't know what happened.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think also, though, it's very interesting to notice our reaction to when we know these combos are going to be in a game, such as if we say our decks are bracket 4 or bracket 5, versus the response that we have when they show up, maybe, as you said, kind of out of nowhere or unannounced in a bracket 3 deck. And I think that setting of expectations is one of the most important ingredients in this discussion.
Yes.
But to really get to the bottom of that, we'll need to see the other half of this data, the late game 2-card combos, and we're going to have to do that in the latter half of our show. Because Dana, right now, we've got to get to challenge the stats. There's so much other data on EDHREC, so let's take a quick break to challenge some of that data. A new era of power has arrived with the Alienware Area 51 gaming laptops, intentionally engineered to push more power to the CPU and GPU for maximum performance. This otherworldly power paired with the game-changing AI capabilities of NVIDIA GeForce RTX 50 series GPUs with DLSS4 amplifies performance and image precision for ultra-smooth, stunning gameplay. And with the new cryo chamber design, airflow is focused exactly where it's needed most. Fused with Alienware's enhanced thermal solutions, it creates a higher power output without raising noise levels, allowing you to play with confidence even during the most demanding marathon gaming sessions. So, no matter what you are playing, Alienware ensures every game runs precisely as its developers intended. A new era of power is here. All you have to do is take it. Discover Area 51 today at alienware.com.
Today, I have a challenge of stats brought to us by listener Stephen T, aka Dougrim, and it's for the commander, the Mind Skinner. The Mind Skinner is a 10-power unblockable nightmare for triple blue from Duskmourn, and the card has the text, if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage and each opponent mills that many cards. And this challenge is for a non-bow involving Sword of Body and Mind, the protection from blue and green sword that mills the damaged opponent for 10 cards and creates a 2/2 wolf. And right now this is being played in about 340 the Mind Skinner decks, and it should probably be in 0. The issue being that since the Mind Skinner prevents all damage dealt, the sword's ability never actually triggers. Steven says he saw an opponent discover this mid-game, right before they proceeded to mill us for 60 apiece in one turn. Some people might be playing this for a backup, but there are a lot of other options you can run that aren't neutralized just by having your commander out. And I would say this is generally true in the Mind Skinner decks for anything that applies an on-damage trigger. I just checked, and there are 40 the Mind Skinner decks running Coastal Piracy, where you draw a card when combat damage is dealt, for example, and the Mind Skinner would turn that card off too. So if you're playing the Mind Skinner, be aware of cards you're running that trigger off of combat damage being dealt, because your commander would have shut that off.
Wow, great catch, Dougrim. Thank you so much for that challenge. That's a great nombo to point out. And I didn't think about it until just now either, but I really, really like that. Thank you. All right, I'll move to my challenge, and my challenge this week is an underplayed little number for Titus Yuna's Guardian decks, or Titus, argue about it in the comments. That sounds fun. I'm currently making a video about brewing 10 budget decks for Final Fantasy. Hopefully that video is out by the time that this episode goes live. I'll link it in the description if it is. But along that process, I discovered that the card Bulwark Ox is only showing up in 150 of the 4,500 Titus decks that are out there right now. As a reminder, Titus can move your counters around on your creatures, and once per turn, if you hit an opponent with a creature that is wearing a counter, you get to draw a card and proliferate, which is a really strong ability. Atraxa would be proud. The Bulwark Ox is a 2-mana white 2/2 that has all this text about saddling that we honestly just do not care about. What we care about is the text that says we can sacrifice the Ox to give each creature we control that has a counter on it hexproof and indestructible for the turn. That is perfect. +1 counter decks need to protect their creatures, or else they will lose all of those counters that they have spent an entire game building up. So the more protection effects that you have, it just affords you so much more leeway to make the moves that you want to make and to continue pressuring your opponent's life totals. So a 21-cent card that helps you out is so great. Don't overlook Bulwark Ox for a deck like this. It's from a set that wasn't necessarily great, but this effect is fantastic within the niche of +1 counters. So give this one a look if you're playing in that realm.
Challenge the Stats is brought to you by Cardsphere, our favorite way to get the cards that we need to build decks we're playing. Go to cardsphere.com/EDHRECast to get started today.
All right, Dana, so we've seen some early game combos and the data associated with those, but now let's move to those late game 2-card combos. The ones that the community voted are actually probably a little bit more socially acceptable in spaces like bracket 3, as well as in spaces like brackets 4 and 5. Humorously, one of the first things that we see on this page is actually a familiar face, Exquisite Blood, once again. But this time it's not paired up with Sanguine Bond, it's paired up with Aetherflux Reservoir, which can pay 50 life to deal 50 damage to someone, and Exquisite Blood, of course, seeing that damage will refund you all of that life. This one actually, showing up in 41,000 possible decks out there, has been voted by the community as being a little bit more like, if this happened in a bracket 3 type of game, it'd actually be probably kind of fun, or it maybe only happens at a stage in the game where everyone is ready for that game to end. And frankly, it does seem like a literal blast for the game to end in that fashion.
This is interesting because we already saw Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond. So seeing this combo here in the late game combos makes for a really good compare and contrast about what's the difference is. And the main difference is Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood combo is really easy to trigger. Anything that makes a person lose life sets the combo off and you win the game. I've seen people trigger that, back in the day when Mana Crypt was legal.
Right.
Someone takes damage from their Mana Crypt and it triggers the effect. It keeps them from being able to trigger their fetch lands. It, like anything that will do it, a single point of combat damage, whatever, sets that off. Aetherflux Reservoir and Exquisite Blood, however, there's a lot more steps to get you there. That's not to say sometimes you won't get lucky and drop it when you immediately have 50 life. This can be the kind of combo that happens immediately, but for the most part, you have to do things to get there, and it allows a person to see that coming and interact with it immediately in a way that they really necessarily can't do with Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood.
Precisely. This requires, at the very least, a 51 life threshold for you, the person playing it, which makes it very reminiscent of other cards like Felidar Sovereign or Test of Endurance, cards that in life gain decks require you to have a certain amount of life to just win the game outright. But there is still that window of interactivity where you have to have gotten to that threshold in the first place and then also deploy both of these cards. So this feels like a very different thing compared to even, Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood. If those are your turn, let's say you ramp a little bit and then that's your turn 4 and your turn 5 play, you are holding the game hostage immediately. That's not the kind of pace that you can do here at this stage necessarily. It requires a little bit more effort. And again, it's kind of an explosive way for a game to end. And I could see people having a more whoa type of response to that compared to just, they played the 2 famous life gain combo cards. I guess this game is over now.
Yeah. In the mana value matters a little bit here too. Granted, Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond are of a similar cost, but these are things you have to take multiple turns probably to get out, or it is so deep into the game that it doesn't necessarily matter. And that's really relevant with the next combo we're looking at here, Shieldred the Apocalypse and Peer into the Abyss. Shieldred is 4 mana, 2 double black, but Peer into the Abyss is 7, 4 and trip black. So you have to have Shieldred out. So even if you've cast it the previous turn, it has to sit there for a full turn, and then you have to have the 7 mana available to cast Peer into the Abyss. It's not to say you can't have some free confluence of, mana rocks and Dark Ritual or something and pop this off early. But again, to do that requires a bunch of pieces. This is just a combo that definitionally happens late game because that's when you will have enough mana to do it. Even if everything works perfectly and you only need those 2 cards to get the win or kill somebody, it's still the kind of thing that very often is just going to happen when the game has got to that late stage.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Peer into the Abyss actually shows up in several other combos. It can pair up with a lot of other cards. Orcish Bowmasters is showing up as one of those things here too. The card Underworld Dreams as well. So things that when an opponent draws a card, they'll lose a bunch of life, and Peer into the Abyss can force them to do exactly that. I will share a quick story about how I deflecting swatted a Peer into the Abyss from a shielded player one time, and it was a pretty hilarious moment at the table. But another crucial thing here too is that this only nukes a single opponent.
Right.
This doesn't end the game for literally everybody. This does take one person out, which if that happens super early in a game can be maybe a tad bit frustrating, but that is a different creature entirely to something that causes you, the person, to just win the game flat out compared to nuking one person down.
Right.
So not just the mana cost stuff as you were mentioning, but also how much damage, what the impact really is, and in this case being just one opponent, that also matters a lot here too.
Yeah, and that's true with almost all of these combos, because this is definitely a card that gets batched up with. There's a bunch of combos here in the list that involve Peer into the Abyss, but most of them also work that way. The Orcish Bellmaster combo, the Underworld Dreams combo, they are taking a single player out, which, like you said, feels pretty bad if you're that player, but it's not necessarily ending the game and killing everyone either. And that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, we can see that there is a little bit further down on the page, there is Peer into the Abyss with Psychosis Crawler, a somewhat decently popular combination there, showing up in 21,000 decks. So I think that's also something for us to pay attention to here. That is a pretty big drop-off compared to a lot of the other numbers that we've been seeing for these combos so far. So it isn't just what the combo is capable of doing, but also, are people even playing this combo in the first place? Right. And in this case, it's actually not a terribly popular thing to have both of those cards showing up in the same deck. A lot of the Wheels decks that will be using a Psychosis Crawler maybe feel that they don't even need to bother with a Peer into the Abyss in the first place. So the context of what decks are even using these matters quite a lot as well in how people feel about them.
Yeah, I think this is something I think you see more in the late 2-card combo style decks and the brackets that run those as well, where it's not necessarily about a specific combo that you're trying to get to, and that is your win condition or the line of play you're seeking out, so much as it is cards that are really useful in your deck. Oh, and they happen to combo together if you happen to have them out at the same time.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you really don't care, because both those pieces are useful in your deck just in general based on like what your theme is or what you're trying to do.
I very much agree with that. We see a combo here that involves poison counters. Vraska, Betrayal, Sting, a planeswalker who, if she ults, can give a player who has fewer than 9 poison counters a number of counters equal to the difference. And that is paired up with Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider, which if you would give people poison, is going to double the amount of poison that they get. It doubles all of your counters that you're giving out to people, to your own stuff. It's a very powerful card. And if you are playing an infect strategy, chances are high that you just happen to be playing both of these because they're both just very good for that strategy in general.
And again, though, it's 12 mana to get there.
Right.
This is a combo that requires you to be at a certain point in the game. Yes, you're in green if you have access to Vorinclex, so maybe you can ramp a little bit. But again, for the most part, like, you have to advance the game to the state where you feel pretty comfortable calling it late game to even have these two cards out in existence in the first place. And then Vraska needs to advance in her loyalty enough to actually use the ability to put the poison counters on people as well. Like I said, there's just a lot more steps to get most of these combos to work than there are in the early game 2-card combos we talked about for brackets 4 and brackets 5.
Well, and you said Vraska has to advance. Now, ideally, you could play Vorinclex and then Vraska, and Vorinclex will double the loyalty counters.
Sure.
But even then, that's another step.
Right.
The timing of which card has to come first matters a lot, too. You can't play these in any sequence the way that you could with some of the other combos that we saw earlier on in this episode.
Right.
If you want to actually do the blowout out of nowhere thing with this, that requires them to be drawn and deployed at certain steps. So again, there are these little things that actually do make quite a big difference.
Mm-hmm. And employed in sequence, which oftentimes implies over the course of multiple turns.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, a Thassa's Oracle combo where they're so efficient and so cheap, you can just do it on one turn in one fell swoop and win the game.
Mm-hmm. We're kind of seeing a similar energy with another combo here, the next most popular one in this category about late game 2-card combos. Aurelia, the War Leader, who gives you extra combats when she attacks for the first time each turn, and Helm of the Host, which can, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that is a copy of the equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary. So every turn you will be making another new Aurelia who gets to attack. It is her first time attacking that turn, gives you another combat step. Helm of the Host repeats. I would actually kind of wager that if this is showing up in a deck, it is pretty much on purpose. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't accidentally throw an expensive card like this into a deck without maybe thinking that you could do a little bit of that type of infinite combo action. I think Helm of the Host is so famous for doing that. But at the same time, it's still a lot of steps. You do have to find the things that will allow you to equip this thing in the first place, because that equip cost is 5 mana. So if you would actually want this to feel properly out of nowhere, it does require a little bit of extra apparatus from the rest of your deck to allow the equipment to do things very efficiently. Like this, it seems like an intentional combo, but not an efficient combo to me, which is, again, another one of those small details that matters a lot.
Absolutely. 6 mana for Aurelia, 4 mana for Helm of the Host, 5 to equip it, or, some other card lets you equip for free, but like that requires you to have that card and pay some amount of mana to cast it or get it into play, however that works. So like, just, because of how mana intensive this is going to wind up being, or how card intensive it's going to wind up being, require an extra piece. And then you have to swing through and deal combat damage as well. So there's just, again, a lot of moving parts that are required for this combo to actually work, and that makes it much safer to call a late game combo versus an early game combo.
Well, and another thing that we haven't mentioned yet here too is that for some of these other combos that the community's voted on as a little bit like more comfortable in bracket 3 in the like later stages of the game, is that also these feel a lot more interactable, not just because of the extra turns, like you mentioned, like it takes a couple of turns to set these up, but also some of them producing, infinite death triggers or making more tokens leaves room for other people. Like, I don't know, I play Blood Artists, like I play Conrads and stuff. Right. So if you are making some of these, it feels like I have a greater chance of my cards affecting your ability to do stuff compared to, the just straight up demonic consultation into Thassa's Oracle. Like, right. No cards that I have in play are going to stop that unless they like actively are countering every spell that person is trying to cast. So a quality that I'm noticing about some of these other combos is that there's a greater chance that just a couple of random cards that I have in my deck might affect what you're doing just a little bit. Like you just mentioned with the Aurelia example, like let's say everyone has a lot of flying creatures, that might make this one a little bit of a non-starter if they can always kill the brand new Aurelia token that shows up. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit more room for that interaction here, and again, that matters a lot.
Yeah. The inflection points.
Yeah.
Is the way I would phrase that. There's just a lot more points where you can interact with that combo to prevent it from working than there is from the classic Thassa's Oracle combos.
100%. Even a ghostly prison stops this type of combo from being able to defeat you. And that's a pretty common, popular card.
Sure.
So as we were saying, some of these combos just end up a little bit less effective by dint of some of the cards that people might incidentally be playing on the other side of the field.
Right.
All right. Now, we've just covered a small handful of these combos. And again, some of them are a little bit more complex than others. So check out this resource. That's edhrec.com/combos. And you've got different options for the early game versus the late game. And if you want to see how those combos work, you can head right to those pages. It will explain all of the information for you, which commanders are playing them most often. It's a fantastic tool. Dana, we've covered a lot of data about these various combos so far, and I think it makes sense for us to circle back around to that question, the question of this episode about what is the real reason that people dislike experiencing combos in EDH. Has all of this data, has gotten the lay of the land, has that affected the way that you are perceiving any of these things, or help you figure out why people have some of the reactions that they do when combos come up in games?
Yeah, the thing that jumps out at me, so I was having a conversation on our Discord earlier today that you can be a member of. Go to patreon.com/EDHRECast.
That segue, though.
Matt Morgan, shout out. But we were having a conversation, and I mentioned that I really don't like cards that have exit the battlefield triggers. And the reason I don't, it's very powerful because you're almost always going to get your thing. But that's what I don't like about them is because there's no response points for the most part for you to interact with it. If a creature has a death trigger, well, maybe you can, like, people tend to run exile. Or they tend to run, ways to bounce it to someone's hand or something. You usually just accidentally have ways to keep those things from happening. You aren't usually running a stifle effect, which is one of the few ways to keep an exit the battlefield trigger from occurring. So it's a thing that you just don't have the ability to respond to. That's why I don't necessarily love that as a mechanic in the game. I think that's kind of a similar thing to the thing that people don't like about combos. They don't like when they lack an ability to respond to it.
Yeah.
I think if they lose to it and they felt like, oh, I could have dealt with that, I just had some bad luck, that's different.
Yeah.
But when they lose to it and feel like, oh, I didn't have a chance, there was no situation where I was going to be able to stop that, I think that's when they really dislike it.
I really like that observation. That is one of the things that has led to bans in the past. Hull Breacher, for instance. One of the best places to potentially try and interact with that was while it was on the stack. If it's in play, it's probably already up to something really nefarious because of the way that the person who's playing that card will do stuff. Or Dockside Extortionist for pretty similar reasons. Those are cards where the best inflection point is probably like, do you have a counterspell? And that's not always a reasonable thing to 100% expect, especially from players in a bracket 2 type of space. So I really like your point there about making sure that when it does have something that feels like I can't meaningfully interact with that, that's a huge reason why it could have a sudden emotional, dang it type of feeling or a little bit of flustering effect on you for sure. For another observation, another trend that I kind of notice here as well is honestly just the establishing case here of is this in a bracket 3 deck or in a bracket 4 deck? Because as we were going over some of those early game combos, if I'm playing CEDH, I don't mind at all that the game is ending with Thassa's Oracle. Lots of them do. There's no emotional response to that whatsoever.
Right.
Because the expectations have properly been set by us upfront saying, here's the type of game that I want to play. And there's actually a lot of tension in recognizing when someone's angling to try and set that type of thing up, and tension in me knowing, all right, well, if I think that that's happening, can I actually stop it? As long as you set the expectations, I feel like those are actually perfectly fine. So those are, if anything, kind of fun. That's where you'll get the most intense feeling from the game in a good way instead. So to me, so much of this just comes down to, have you as a player properly set the expectations for your opponents about how sweaty this game is going to be or not? And that is a huge way to make sure that these combos will land with as much gusto as you, the player playing them, hopes that the rest of the table will be able to have with them too.
Yeah, and many years ago, I was playing at an event where it was a play-in to get into a larger tournament, and it was like we were playing with it was a limited environment, and I had gotten multiple green spells that were like land destruction spells. I think this was in Theros. I don't remember what the sorcery was, but like it was a land destruction land. My opponent, I went first and ramped out, and then my opponent missed his land drop on turn 3, and I blew up his land to take him to 1, and then I top decked on the next turn another land removal spell.
Okay.
Took out his other land, and he missed another land drop on his draw. I didn't feel remotely bad about doing that because that was the establishment, that was what we were playing in, right? Like that was you were playing to play into a larger event. You're going all out.
Yeah.
There was no, and he didn't feel bad about it either.
Right.
That's a whole different deal than playing in bracket 2 or bracket 3 where like everyone's looking to at least get to a certain point in the game and like see some of their deck and do a few things. There are just things that are appropriate in certain places and aren't appropriate in other places. And that CEDH avoids that.
Yeah.
Everything goes, right? Remove their lands and take them to none on turn 4. That's okay. That's the way it works.
Yeah, and bracket 4 also has a lot of that very same energy, which is why so many of those combos feel so great there. But if if some of those things were to show up in the space bracket 3 where you've upgraded some of your precons, okay, it's a little bit less. I wish that we'd known what we were in for. And that's exactly the whole point of the bracket system in the first place. But yeah, I really appreciate that anecdote so much because yes, your attitude about combos completely shifts when you know what you're in for. Yeah. And that is a good way to remind us all that there is not an objective quality about combos. There is no objective good or objective bad. Context is so important to figuring out how it is that we feel or how we'll react to each of those things and what we do and don't want to see in our games and stuff like that. I also kind of want to point out, and Dana, you've got a lot of experience playing against Blink decks, and this feels relevant to Blink decks. I just want to point out that for some decks, comboing out is occasionally like the polite thing to do, and I think that's especially the case for like a Blink deck. I don't know, you've got a Brago player in your meta, and the game is usually going to end with some type of combo off of the Blink-tastic stuff that commander can do, because if they don't combo out, well, the game's going to take 10 more rounds, and that's a long time to wait.
Right. Yeah, right. The other win condition is generating so much value you just eventually lose because you can't catch up, and that's no fun. You'd much rather just lose and have it done and play a new game than you would just losing to the eternal value that Brago can generate, for sure.
Yeah. There's the new Grixis Kefka as well, which is honestly pretty gnarly because it makes everyone discard cards on their hand, and that's rough. But the backside of Kefka, it can also combo out. When your opponents lose life, you'll draw cards, and you can pair it up with a whole bunch of those effects, some of which we mentioned earlier in this very episode.
Yeah.
And that can cause an infinite loop. But honestly, if you are playing a Kefka deck and you've established control in the way that Kefka can, forcing everyone to discard their hand, and then they're all just kind of stuck top decking for several rounds, if Kefka is switching to that back half and does do a combo, at least the game is over faster, right?
Yes,
so in some ways, I feel like that is the better way for the game to end compared to just all right, I guess I'm just going to sit here top decking for 5 more rounds while I wait to see whether Kefka can actually get me. That doesn't sound nearly as enjoyable. So the amount of time between when you've got control of the board and when the game ends, trying to make that as short as possible is actually, I think, the correct move.
Yes, very much so, 100%. I do have one final thought I will throw out there. We kind of broke these down based on some polling data we got back in EDHREC. But when in doubt, if you are unsure if the combo you have in a deck is an early game or late game, if it's going to make it bracket 3 or bracket 4, ask the people you're playing with.
Yeah.
Really often, if you just communicate, people will give you a straightforward answer and tell you what they think. And you'll get an outlier on occasion who will be like, no, absolutely, that's definitely, not appropriate here versus what everyone else says. But by and large, people are looking for a good experience, and they'll give you an honest answer, and they'll tell you what is the appropriate bracket to play that combo in.
I appreciate that final note so much, Dana, because, we've got a lot of data here about what communities at large think. But just there's no objective quality about whether combos are good or bad, there's also no objective thing about them here either. All of this data might not be the way that your playgroup behaves or thinks or feels. So the whole point of this poll wasn't to, get technical and find the absolute truth of it all. It was just to try and gauge what players on average usually feel, but the real important mission of all of that is finding out from other players what their thoughts are. So that's exactly the practice that you should take too in your groups. If you're a little unsure, Dana, exactly as you said, finding out from players what their thoughts are is the entire point of this whole mission, because finding out from players what their thoughts are is the way that you get good games. That's the way that everyone has a fantastic time in a social environment such as this one, and that you get to have those memorable experiences where the game ended in a way that you went, whoa, rather than it ended in a way that you went, aw. So that's, what a fantastic point to end on, Dana. Figure out what people think. It's exactly the note to end on. I love that.
It's just a useful life hack in general. Communication, very, very good.
Yeah, 100%. Folks out there, if you haven't checked out this page, again, that is edhrec.com/combo. There is so much data over there. We really recommend giving it a look. Whether you want to play those combos yourself, whether you want to discover if your deck happens to accidentally have any of them in there, and whether those are the types of things that you want to avoid or that you want to pursue. And if you want to figure out how those combos even work, there's so much going on that page. And if you have any particular favorite combos out there, definitely let us know in the comments about any that you think are especially fun ways to make the game go out with a huge infinite bang. With that though, Dana, we're going to call this episode to a close. So if our listeners would like to get in touch with us, where can they find you online?
You can find me online at Blue Sky at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And you can find me everywhere online, from Instagram to Blue Sky at Joseph M. Schultz, and you can find the cast online at EDHRECast. And of course, if you'd like to get access to any exclusive content or our Challenge the Stats spreadsheet, you can support us over on patreon.com/EDHRECast. And hey, if you want to wish me a happy birthday, consider liking and subscribing for us to hit that 100K at the beginning of next month. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights, but until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.